The dazzling chandelier in the grand wedding hall in Manila suddenly dimmed as 300 guests froze in stunned silence. My mom's face burned from the unexpected slap by Rebecca, my sister-in-law, as a glass of red wine splashed onto her cream-colored dress, staining the shiny marble floor. Her cold voice tore through the room. "Maria, you're so careless. This is my wedding day. How could you ruin it like this?" Before I could even explain, Fernando, my husband who once vowed to protect me, turned and sided with his sister. "Rebecca is right," he said coldly. "This is her big day. You should be more careful. That betrayal hurt 100 times more than the slap." 300 eyes turned to me. Pity, judgment, silence. And in that moment, the groom Travis stepped up to the microphone, ready to reveal a truth that left the whole room speechless. Welcome to Crying Inside, where we share family stories full of tears, moments of betrayal, sacrifice, and the quiet strength that sometimes even those involved don't expect. The story you're about to hear isn't just a simple revenge story. It's a family story about betrayal, pride, and how a woman finds her voice again while being humiliated in front of hundreds of people. In Filipino families, honor and reputation are always top priority. But what happens when the ones closest to you, your husband, your sister-in-law, become the ones who publicly shame you? And what happens when the truth about who you really are is exposed to everyone? If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss touching and dramatic family stories. And before we start, I want to ask you, have you ever been embarrassed by your own family in front of others? If yes, please share your story in the comments. Maybe your experience can help someone going through the same thing. Let's dive into today's story. My name is Maria. I'm 32 years old. In the eyes of neighbors, relatives, and even my husband, I'm just an ordinary woman, discreet, gentle, and rarely speaking up. But few know that behind this quietness, I am the CEO of a major media company in Asia. I chose to live humbly, drive an old car, dress simply, and even let my husband believe he was the main breadwinner in our family. I didn't do it out of fear, but because I once believed true love shouldn't be controlled by money or power. I wanted Fernando, my husband, to love me for who I am, not for my status. He was a typical man in many Filipino families, confident, a bit patriarchal, always thinking he's the breadwinner. He worked as a business manager with a steady salary and believed he was carrying the family on his shoulders. I let him believe that because sometimes peace is more important than arguing about who's right or wrong. But that peace never lasted, especially when Rebecca, Fernando's younger sister, came into the picture. Rebecca was always arrogant, living a fake influencer lifestyle that never took off. Her social media was full of luxurious photos, but in reality, she was drowning in debt. Rebecca met Travis, a promising young architect. Just 8 months after meeting, they rushed into marriage, and Fernando's family saw it as their chance to change their fate. The irony was, only Travis and I knew a truth no one else in the family or guests suspected. 5 years ago, I was the one who gave Travis his first big break to launch his career. Back then, Travis was an unknown architect, full of ambition but without anyone's trust. I saw myself in him at the start, passionate, reckless, but overlooked. I went against the board's objections and placed my trust in him. And that decision changed his future forever. Travis has always been grateful, but he stayed quiet when I asked him, "Just see me as Maria, Fernando's wife. Don't reveal anything else." He nodded, though his eyes always showed confusion when he saw me being looked down on by Rebecca and pushed aside by Fernando. Rebecca's wedding was grand, held at a big hotel in Manila after the mass at the church. All relatives, friends, and business associates were present. In Filipino culture, a wedding isn't just a happy day, but also a way to show the family's honor to the community. The more guests, and the more lavish the celebration, the more respected the pamilya becomes. For Rebecca, this is the stage to prove she has become the reina in everyone's eyes. For Fernando, this is the chance to brag that his family has a sister married to a rich man. As for me, this is the day when everything I've tried to hide throughout 3 years of marriage will be exposed in a way I never expected. After the mass at the church, the convoy took all the guests to a luxurious hotel in the heart of Manila. The banquet hall was sparkling under crystal lights, with white tablecloths neatly spread and fragrant lily bouquets arranged perfectly. Everyone was excited, dressed in gorgeous outfits, laughter and chatter filling the air. In that lavish scene, Maria, just wanted to quietly fade into the background. I chose a simple cream dress, with a modest round neckline, nothing flashy, nothing to draw attention. I always believed that on a family's big day, one should be humble and let others take the spotlight. But from the moment I walked in, I knew my place was not as a valued member. I felt like a maid borrowed just to fill a role. Fernando, my husband, didn't let me sit next to him, didn't take my hand to greet guests, but kept ordering me around for small tasks. Maria, go check the gift table again. Looks like some things aren't arranged properly. I nodded and walked away under curious stares. A few minutes later, he whispered, Maria, the photographer is calling. Can you gather the relatives for me? I scrambled again. Before I could even sit down for a sip of water, he turned and said, Maria, stand at the back. Don't block the main frame. Let my sister shine. Every word from him felt like a small cut inside me. He didn't realize, or maybe deliberately refused to realize, that I am also part of this family, that I deserve respect too. I forced a smile, hiding my hurt, because I had long been used to being left out of the warm circle of his family. In Filipino culture, women are often expected to be patient and silent to keep the peace. But the more silent I was, the further away I felt pushed. Rebecca, my sister-in-law, the bride today in a pure white dress, came over while I was busy arranging the gift table. Her smile flashed like a sharp knife. Aunt Maria, bake it so serious all the time? Smile. It's a wedding day. I forced a smile, not knowing how to respond. The way Rebecca spoke sounded like concern, but her mocking eyes gave it all away. In my sister-in-law's eyes, I was nothing but an outsider, always annoying her with my not fancy enough presence. The sarcastic remarks didn't stop there. When guests complimented the food, Rebecca casually said, Maria doesn't cook much, so maybe this tastes good because it's not from our house. The whole table chuckled faintly. I lowered my head, hiding my clenched hands under the table. Another time, a relative praised the dress I was wearing, and Rebecca half smiled. It's simple, right? She really doesn't have the class for gowns like this. Fernando heard it, but instead of defending me, he stayed silent, even nodding as if he agreed. In that brightly lit room, I suddenly felt like a shadow. Everyone raised their glasses with bright smiles, but I stood on the sidelines, only remembered when someone needed help cleaning up, arranging things, or holding something. Rebecca always made sure to emphasize that I didn't belong to her world. Every word from my sister-in-law was like an invisible slap, and Fernando's silence was the knife stabbing the last bit of my faith. I used to think being a daughter-in-law meant enduring, overlooking things to keep the peace. But today, on my sister-in-law's wedding day, I realized that endurance was no longer sacrifice, it had turned into humiliation. Right in the middle of the crowd, I felt pushed to the bottom, with no place to stand. The tension hadn't exploded yet, but it had been building up like a simmering volcano. I knew it would only take a small incident for everything to erupt, sweeping away family, marriage, and the years I had believed silence was the safest choice. The band switched to a familiar love song, the singer's voice soft as silk, drifting through the rows of white-draped tables. The host invited everyone to take their seats to prepare for the speeches. I returned to my table in the left corner of the room, where the warm light was just enough to see without glaring. On the stage, the microphones sparkled under the hanging chandeliers, ready and waiting. Next to me, Fernando's chair was empty. He is at the head table with the bride's family. The host invites Fernando to speak first. As the bride's brother, he walks up the steps like he's stepping into a role he's rehearsed thoroughly. A confident smile, teeth straightened just right. He scans the room and pauses for half a second where I'm sitting. I wait for a small nod, or just a look to acknowledge I'm here. He quickly turns away. Fernando starts with sweet words about Rebecca, about a strong, ambitious girl who always wants to shine. He tells a childhood story of Rebecca standing on a plastic chair, pretending to be a beauty queen in front of the mirror, saying she would one day get applause from the whole room. The whole room laughs. He raises his glass, saying, Rebecca deserves a magnificent wedding, deserving of all the best things. Then he pauses, lowers his voice, as if about to share a private thought. He says, "Someone in the family always chooses to stand behind, always chooses silence, always says they only do small jobs, no need for anyone's attention." He says he really admires Rebecca for never accepting being invisible. The room laughs happily again. I sit up straight. The words invisible, standing behind, silence, feel like little needles. I know who he's talking about. He doesn't name me, but several people at my table glance over, briefly uneasy. An aunt tightens her lips, puts her hand over mine, and gently squeezes it. Her eyes are warm but sad. I thank her with a very small nod. Inside me, something tightens. Not anger, just a feeling of sinking, like missing a step on the stairs. Fernando finishes with a clear, congratulatory message. The whole room raises their glasses. I raise my glass of water too. When the applause dies down, the host invites the friends to speak. A few light-hearted stories are shared. Everyone laughs. I smile along, slow and thin, like a streak of light on water. At the next table, two young women whisper to each other. One asks if I'm a distant relative. The other says she heard I work part-time office jobs, staying home more than going out to work. They looked at me as if I were trying to fit an ordinary puzzle piece into a magnificent painting. I smiled politely. There was nothing to correct without sounding like I was showing off at someone else's wedding. I chose to stay silent. My silence had long become my armor. Thin, but enough to cover part of my left chest. Travis stopped by my table briefly, like a breeze passing through the cool air. He placed his hand on the back of the chair, bowed his head, instead of saying hello, and quietly asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, thank you. His eyes paused for a moment. He understood. Then he turned back to the stage as the coordinator signaled for the group photo session. As guests started standing up and moving around, Rebecca appeared in front of me with two bridesmaids. Her long white dress lightly swept the marble floor, and the beads on the hem sparkled like dew in the light. She sweetly called me 8, asking me to help out at the cake table because the decorators went to the wrong floor. The last sentence stretched out like half a breath. We walked over to the 3-tiered cake, covered in white frosting, edged with ivory sugar flowers. Rebecca looked around, then nodded toward a few small candles. She told me to straighten the candles evenly, then suddenly glanced down at my dress and complimented how neat it was, perfect for moving around a lot. That compliment landed like a coin, ringing softly in my head, before fading away. I nodded and aligned the candles in a straight row. A bridesmaid took behind-the-scenes photos, laughing and chatting cheerfully. Rebecca tilted her head and half-jokingly asked why I smiled so little, saying today was a happy day and I didn't need to look so serious like I was at the office. Once again, she used the word class when looking at the handkerchief I was folding neatly. She said that at parties like this, the important thing is knowing where to stand to look good. I felt my knees stiffen, like standing too long in a mass, afraid to move for fear of making noise. I thanked her for the reminder, then stepped aside to the edge of the table, giving the center spot to the bride for posing. Fernando passed by, asked me to hold his phone, then asked me to remind the band to switch to Rebecca's favorite song list for the opening dance. I took it without looking at the screen, and just put it into my small wallet. He continued, saying, if possible, to call the event manager to change the order of 2 segments so we can be on time for the group photo with the bride's side family. I asked him if he needed me to go on stage. He shook his head and told me to stay below so it would be easier to call me if the host needed anything. I said yes. My voice so natural even I felt like nothing was wrong. The band changed tempo, the light drum beats backing a youthful ballad. The kids ran around the pillars, and the paper flowers above swayed gently. I walked past the long row of tables where a group of uncles were chatting about business. One of them turned and asked if I was the groom's cousin. I replied that I was Fernando's wife. He brightened up, then nodded and said, "So you're the woman of the family taking care of the house. That's good." He said nowadays it's hard to find a wife who knows how to manage the home and step back to let others shine. I smiled and thanked him for the compliment. Inside, a small wave rose, then quickly settled. Travis passed by again when the coordinator called him to test the lighting for the cake cutting. He paused for a second and said just enough for me to hear that the cake was ready. I told him the candles were straight. A seemingly meaningless exchange, But in his second sentence, I heard myself reassuring myself. Everything was ready, only I wasn't. For the opening dance, Rebecca shone brightly like a lamp. She twirled under Travis's hand, her dress flaring out, then closing like a flower petal. The audience clapped. When the music ended, the MC invited everyone to look toward the stage for the cake cutting. I stood at the edge, breathing in and out slowly. Rebecca turned to find me in the crowd, called my name clearly, and asked Aunt Maria to come up and help arrange the knives and forks neatly. The whole room laughed happily again. I stepped forward, my steps slow, placing each small plate in a row, smoothing the tablecloth edges, adjusting the flower bouquet's position for balance. Everything was perfect. I stepped back and gave way to the bride and groom. Rebecca leaned close to my ear, her voice low enough for a few nearby to hear. She told me I'm good at things like this, careful, clean, and helpful. Then she added, if I tried to smile more, I wouldn't look so much like I'm just going to a meeting. I looked her straight in the eyes and calmly said, thank you. I didn't feel the need to clarify that every meeting of mine, if I wanted, could change the entire communication plan of a corporation. No one here needs to know that right now. Today's story is about her. A gentle breeze swept through as the lobby doors opened for the photo crew to come in. The white curtains fluttered softly. I suddenly remembered my handkerchief still on the table earlier. I turned back to get it, then returned to the stage as the MC asked me to bring a small chair for the bride's grandmother to sit near the cake-cutting area. I did everything like someone playing a familiar song. My hands remembered every piano key position. The guests started whispering. Someone asked where I worked. A middle-aged woman guessed I was a teacher because of my calm voice and meticulous organization. Another said I was probably an administrative staff at a small company. I smiled, answering the simplest questions with the simplest answers. No one was wrong. They were just piecing together the fragments of the picture they had. I didn't blame them. Travis stood across from me, beyond the cake table. His eyes rested on my hand for a moment. Then he looked up. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but the photographer called him back to his spot. I saw in his eyes a light similar to the first time he walked into my meeting room many years ago. The light of someone counting the beat before speaking something important. I wondered when he would finish counting. Rebecca came back after a round of toasts. She was flushed from the champagne and from the compliments flying around like confetti. She looked around, saw me, then gave a smile outsiders would call friendly. She placed her hand on my arm, thanking me for taking care of the backstage. She added a casual comment that everyone has their place on a night like this. Some people shine in front of the camera. Someone is quietly handling everything behind the scenes. The last sentence fell softly, like powdered dust. I looked at her hand in mine. Her nails were painted in a sparkling ombre style. I gently pulled my hand away, like removing a thread caught on a shirt. The host invited the bride and groom to place their hands on the knife handle. Applause broke out. I stepped back another step for a wider shot. Fernando appeared beside Rebecca, whispering something that made her smile. Then he glanced at me. His eyes flickered past like a shadow. I couldn't read anything in them except hurry. A little girl ran past, almost bumping into my leg. I caught her in time, placing my hand on her head. Her mother thanked me and apologized. I said it was okay. Small things like that made me feel not completely invisible. At least, I still managed to do something at the right moment. The sound of the knife cutting through the smooth frosting was soft, like a whisper. Rebecca looked up smiling, holding up the first piece of cake. Cameras flashed rapidly. Travis gently supported her hand. Down below, chairs shifted quietly as people tried to get a good angle. The MC counted 1, 2, 3, asking the whole room to applaud loudly. Everyone clapped in rhythm. I clapped too, just a beat slower. Right after the cake cutting came photos with family. The coordinator handed over a list. I was asked to call out each group's name to speed things up. I did it so smoothly the event manager looked at me and shrugged lightly in approval. Rebecca stood in the middle, her hand loosely resting on Travis's arm, smiling perfectly. She tilted her head and whispered to me as she passed by that the way I called out names made everything feel professional. Then she added that people should do what they're best at. I nodded. No words needed. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier by the minute. not because it was hot, because layers of words were piling up. Jokes at the tables, polite compliments, casual passing remarks, each one, bit by bit, placed on my chest like pebbles. I kept breathing evenly. I knew if I breathed too fast, the pebbles would clatter and everyone would hear. Travis passed by me for the third time. This time, he stopped long enough to say a full sentence. He asked if I wanted to sit down for a moment. I shook my head, saying I was used to standing. He looked at me for another second. Enough for me to understand he was weighing the line between keeping his promise and doing what's right. He turned away when someone called him on the microphone. The photo session was almost done when the MC announced there would be a moment to thank those who helped a lot during the wedding preparations. Rebecca took the mic, smiling as she named a few bridesmaids, vendors, and even the event manager. I stood at the edge of the stage, leaning slightly to give them room to step up and receive a small bouquet. As the applause died down, Rebecca looked around. She said there was one more person. She invited Aunt Maria to come up. I stepped up, hearing my shoes tapping the stairs one by one, like tapping a rhythm on a palm. Rebecca thanked me for reminding the band, adjusting the cake, calling the guest list, and arranging the gift table. She said I was always careful, and without me many things probably would have been more chaotic. Then she joked that maybe I was born to do these kinds of things because I looked perfect for it. The room chuckled softly. I looked straight into the microphone. I said thank you and congratulated her. I was about to step back. Rebecca opened her arms, asking me to come closer for a hug. I stepped forward. In that moment, everything quieted, as if someone had just turned down the volume of the whole room. I heard my breathing, light and steady. I thought about everything that had happened from morning until now. I thought about the words falling on me like misty rain. I thought about the fingers resting on the edge of the dress to avoid accidentally stepping on my sister-in-law's white train. And I heard a thin thread stretched tight in the air. I still didn't know where it would snap. All I knew was that the whole room was standing still, like a photo about to blur the moment the shutter is pressed. No one knows what will happen after this hug. Neither do I. But I can feel it clearly. There's a thin line waiting for a foot to step on it. Just a little more. Then everything will change color. When Rebecca spread her arms to call me on stage to say thanks, I stepped forward and hugged her out of basic courtesy. I leaned in very lightly, my hand holding the edge of my skirt so I wouldn't touch my sister-in-law's long white train. But the marble floor was slippery. The beads on Rebecca's dress tail caught right on my heel. A soft snap like stretched thread sounded. Small, but in that moment it echoed like a door slamming in a completely silent room. Rebecca froze for half a beat, then stepped back, eyes wide open. She looked down at the dress tail and saw a loose, beaded strip at the hem. Almost no one would have noticed unless they bent down close. But she screamed, like someone had just torn her whole veil apart. Rebecca's hand whipped through the air. The slap came so fast I didn't have time to blink. My cheek burned. The music stopped abruptly. The clinking plates on the last table went silent. 300 people felt like the air was suddenly trapped in their chests. I hadn't even raised my hand when the wineglass was snatched from a nearby waiter's tray. Dark red liquid poured all over my dress. Cold, the strong smell of wine. The elegant cream color turned into blotches like fresh wounds. Rebecca gasped, her voice sharp and high, asking how I dared ruin her wedding day. The question didn't wait for an answer. It was thrown out to mark who had the right to define right and wrong in this room. I took a step back reflexively. The floor was still slippery. My throat was dry. I was about to say sorry for the stumble, that I tried to avoid it, that the loose beads could easily be sewn back after the party. But Fernando came first. He wrapped his arm around Rebecca's shoulders, pulling her close to shield her. He looked at me, his gaze cold and flat. He told me I should have been more careful. "This is your sister's big day. How could you be so careless?" Those words hit heavier than a glass of wine. I heard my heart skip a beat, not from pain, but from breaking. I stood right in front of the man who once promised to hold my hand through tough times and saw him standing between me and my sister like a wall. Not a protective wall, but a dividing line of exclusion. My days of silent endurance, the times I reminded myself that yielding is keeping the family together, suddenly turned into a rope tightening around my chest. No one said a word, Not a single chair moved. The musician put down the violin completely. Whispers were swallowed up by the red carpet. 300 faces, each carrying a different question. A young server held a stack of tissues, but didn't dare to step forward. I smelled the scent of lilies mixed with wine, so strong, it almost made me nauseous. Travis was standing a few steps away from us at that moment. He observed the whole scene like an architect measuring the strength of a bridge against a strong wind. Then he turned toward the microphone. His steps were steady and purposeful. He tapped the microphone twice with his finger. The clicking sound amplified by the sound system startled the whole room. He asked for permission to speak. His calm voice made everyone sit up straight in their seats. He asked, in a short sentence, if everyone had just witnessed a woman being slapped and having wine poured on her dress right on the wedding stage. The question needed no answer. The room was so silent you could hear the air conditioner running. He continued, asking Rebecca if she recognized who she just slapped. He mentioned my company's name, a name many here had heard somewhere in business sections of newspapers, in projects along the main street. He called me by my full name and added the job title I had kept hidden throughout 3 years of marriage. The atmosphere changed color in a second, visible to the eye. Heads lifted simultaneously, eyes shifted direction at the same time. I heard someone drop a fork. The event manager suddenly straightened his back. The waitstaff immediately hurried over, handing me a clean napkin, whispering apologies for the delay, their hands clumsy but eyes fixed on me, as if they'd just recognized an important guest they hadn't known before. Travis briefly shared that 5 years ago, when he was an unknown architect, my company was the only one willing to listen and bet on his rough sketches. He said a decision I made opened the first door, and the rest of the doors opened by themselves after that. He looked up, straight at me, his voice steady, even though his hands gripped the microphone stand tightly. He said that without me, his career today would have taken a different path. He didn't use the word saved, he used the word believed. Trust, he said, is the rarest and most valuable thing in the early years for anyone trying to build something. Rebecca stepped back another step. Her neatly tied hair started to loosen with a few strands falling out. Her lipstick smudged slightly as she pressed her lips together. She looked around as if searching for an escape visible to the naked eye. But there was no way out. The room had shifted its axis. Its center was no longer the 3-tier cake or the chandelier. It was between me and the microphone in Travis's hand. Fernando relaxed his arms, holding Rebecca. His face lost its usual confident expression, as if someone had just pulled the board out from under his feet. He blinked quickly, once, twice, like trying to regain balance on a floor starting to tilt. Calculations he didn't even know he was making appeared in his eyes. Monthly payments, trips, my calmness facing bills, my vague answers about work. It all started to fit together. Travis lowered the microphone a bit, his voice deepening. He said he planned to announce a new partnership next week, the biggest in his career so far. He said tonight was supposed to be just a night for dancing and laughing, but he couldn't stand by and watch someone publicly humiliated just because people thought she wouldn't fight back. He didn't mention money. He talked about Haya, that sense of honor everyone born into a close-knit community understands. He said some things, if just let pass, would stop him from facing himself honestly tomorrow. Someone clapped once, then fell silent. Then a few more claps, and soon the whole room was applauding. It wasn't applause for a ritual. It was the kind of applause when you see someone doing something kind right when it matters. The applause broke the invisible glass between me and the crowd. No more pitying or curious looks scattered around, just a clear block of shared feeling. I stood still in that rain of sound. My hands dried up, my face cooled down even though the burn of the drink still stung my skin. I didn't speak. My silence now was different from before. It was no longer a thin armor. It was a space for others to hear their own voices. Rebecca heard her own breath quicken. Fernando heard a question he had never asked anyone before. Who am I? Beyond the convenient image he kept in his head. The host tried to regain the rhythm of the party, but even he changed his tone, more respectful when asking the staff to bring fresh towels and inviting the bride backstage to fix her dress train. No one moved. Rebecca didn't go. She stood facing me, gripping her bouquet so tight the petals left marks on her gloves. She wanted to say something, but only managed a short sound, not a full sentence. She turned to Fernando as if seeking words to borrow. He had no words left. Travis turned to me. His eyes silently asked if I wanted to say something. I shook my head gently, not because I was afraid, because I knew it wasn't the right time. Every story has its own timing. The truth had just been revealed. The light needed time for eyes to adjust. An older woman, probably a family friend, was the first to stand. She came close to me, didn't touch the alcohol mark, just placed her hand on my other arm and apologized for what she had just seen. She said just one short sentence. If a woman is disrespected in front of everyone, people should stop and apologize immediately, no matter who she is. She turned to Rebecca, giving a slight nod as a piece of advice. Not harsh, but enough. This time the whispers shifted direction. It was no longer about guessing what I did for a living. It was about behavior, boundaries, things everyone thinks are obvious, but apparently not everyone respects. I heard some middle-aged men talking about how they would raise their sons differently. I heard a young woman whisper that she wouldn't laugh when someone else is embarrassed anymore. The murmurs rolled, like gentle waves, on the sand. Rebecca raised her hand to brush her hair back, trying to fix something on her face. She said sorry, but her words stumbled, like a rehearsal missing a part. She said she didn't know. She said she was just afraid the dress would get ruined. She said she didn't mean to overdo it. Those words fell flat, unable to stand. Because the whole room had just witnessed, not an accident, but a choice. And everyone understood the dress was just the safest excuse for anger to be unleashed. Fernando cleared his throat softly, stepped halfway toward me, then stopped. He said my name coldly, apologized if his words had upset me. He used the word if, like an umbrella. But the storm was over. The umbrella wasn't needed and couldn't cover anything anymore. Travis stepped away from the mic, handing it back to the coordinator, like returning a tool just used for its purpose. He didn't touch me, just stood slightly to the side so anyone who wanted to respect me could approach without squeezing past him. I looked toward the window, where the curtain gently swayed, like the room's breath finally steady again. When the crowd's gaze stopped fixating, the dried wine stains on my dress left strange patterns. I suddenly found it funny thinking that even a stain could be beautiful in its own way if people stood long enough to look. Some servers offered to take me inside to deal with the wine stain, but I thanked them and said I needed a minute here, a minute to remember this feeling clearly. Standing tall in a room that had just relearned how to see me. And in that moment, I saw the image of Rebecca and Fernando collapse under the lights not because anyone pushed them, but because the truth had just pulled the chair from under their illusions. My sister-in-law was no longer the flawless bride, but someone who chose cruelty thinking she wouldn't have to pay the price. My husband was no longer the exemplary older brother, but a man who chose to stand on the wrong side of what's right at the most critical moment. The audience hadn't spoken yet, but every silent decision had already been made. The eyes that were once confused were now clear, like fog lifting from a glass window. No one said a word, but everyone knew tonight couldn't go back to the way it was before. A line was drawn with a slap, a glass of wine, and a truth. I took a deep breath, the smell of wine fading in my lungs. Across the room, Travis nodded slightly, as if promising that from now on, everything would be called by its true name. I placed my hand on the wine stain on my dress, smoothing out a small wrinkle left behind. The clinking of spoons against glasses rang from the far table like a signal forcing the party to continue, but we all knew the next part wouldn't follow the script. Tonight the climax had passed, the lights were on, and no one looked at me the same way anymore. I took a deep breath and gently wiped the wine stain still on my cheek. My heart still ached, but my breathing had evened out. Amid the scattered applause, I slowly walked toward the microphone Travis had just set down. My shoes slid over the red carpet, leaving a trail of spilled wine, but each step grew more certain. I held the microphone, my voice hoarse at first. Thank you all for witnessing. Not because I wanted this to happen, but because sometimes the truth needs to be seen. Silence fell over the room. I looked straight at Fernando, his eyes full of worry, but it was already too late. I smiled softly, a smile no longer forced. I have never regretted living humbly. I chose to be a good wife, to stand behind, not because I was weak or useless. I chose that because I believe family is more important than the spotlight. But today, I realize Humility is sometimes taken for granted. A murmur spread through the audience. I kept going, my voice firmer. What hurts me the most isn't the slap just now. The alcohol stain will dry. The dress will be changed. The bruise will fade. But the betrayal of a life partner, when he chooses to side with someone else instead of me, that's the hardest wound to heal. Fernando lowered his head, his face flushed red. Rebecca was gasping, her face pale under the chandelier light. I turned to the crowd. Right here, right now, I want to make a decision known. I'm going to get a divorce. I can't continue a marriage where love and respect have long been dead. I don't want to live in a family where the truth is buried under pride, and dignity is crushed by arrogance. The whole room seemed to explode. Many voices started whispering. Some women covered their mouths with their hands. Some nodded as if they had been waiting for this moment for a long time. I put down the microphone, but Travis stepped forward, his voice steady. I want to make this clear. The partnership between my company and Maria's company will not change, because her true ability has nothing to do with her personal circumstances. But I also have to be frank, Rebecca. He looked directly at the bride, his tone firm. Success never lasts if it's built on arrogance and cruel behavior. One day, character will be the only thing left when all the lights go out. Rebecca trembled. She wanted to argue, but her lips quivered and no words came out. The crowd suddenly changed completely. Those who once looked at me with contempt now stood up, nodded, and applauded. Someone brought me a handkerchief. Others congratulated me on my courage. They no longer saw me as an unknown wife, but as a woman who knows how to stand up and protect her own dignity. I looked around the entire room. For a moment, I saw all the lights shining on me. But this time, I didn't feel lost. I felt that I truly existed, truly being seen. Tonight, I lost a husband. But I found myself again, and most importantly, I found the voice I had long buried in silence. After I put down the microphone, the whole room still echoed with the words I had just spoken. I saw everyone's eyes change. No more pity, no more scrutinizing looks, but instead, respect. I realized a simple truth. Living humbly is never wrong, but when silence is used as an excuse for others to step on you, then you have to speak up. Because once self-respect is lost, it's hard to get it back. I looked at Rebecca and saw her proud face suddenly shatter. Maybe she will have to learn that a wedding isn't a stage to humiliate others, and happiness can't be built on hurting family. Fernando bowed his head, his hands trembling. I knew, in that moment, he understood the value of the wife he once took for granted. But too late regrets can't mend a broken heart. I stepped off the stage feeling strangely relieved. Not because I won, but because I dared to stand up for myself. I showed everyone. A woman can be humiliated, betrayed, but she will never be defeated if she keeps her dignity. Today's lesson isn't just for me. It's for anyone who's ever been hurt by their family. We can't choose where we're born, nor our blood relatives, but we can choose how to protect our hearts and honor. In Filipino culture, pamilya is always highly valued, but family can't be an excuse for injustice. True love in a family means respect, care, and support, not making someone feel small and worthless. I left that party with empty hands, but a heart full of strength. I know from now on, I won't cry in silence anymore. I'll cry if I need to, but it will be to cleanse and heal. And to you listening to this story, I want to leave you with a question. If one day your own family humiliates you in front of others, will you stay silent and endure, or will you stand up to protect your dignity like I did? Please leave your answer in the comments. Your story might comfort others, and who knows, it might be your own source of strength too. Thank you for listening to today's story. This is not just a revenge story, but also a family story. A tale about honor, betrayal, and the strength it takes to stand up and defend your dignity. At Crying Inside, we believe every family has secrets, wounds, but also the potential to be the starting point for healing. Family stories and revenge stories aren't just to be told, they remind us that love and respect are the most important foundations. If you've ever had a moment that broke your heart, remember you are not alone. And if today's story touched you, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss other stories that might change how you see family and yourself. Thank you for spending time with Crying Inside. Every view, comment, and share from you is the motivation for us to keep bringing real, emotional, and meaningful stories. See you in the next video where a new story will move you to tears but also bring hope.